The U.S. just hit another milestone, and not a good one. America's debt now topping $34 trillion, and the White House has new spin on the debt crisis.
There's a trickle-down debt, if you think about it. Republican tax cuts are responsible for about 90% of it, of the increase in the debt as a share of the economy over the last 2 decades, excluding emergency spending.
Here now, FreedomWorks chief economist and Committee to Unleash Prosperity co-founder, the great Steve Moore. Steve, good to see you. I'm sure you're going to say something about 90% of this debt has to do with the Trump tax cuts, which is complete bogusness. But I want to ask you about $34 trillion in debt. When does this start to have an impact on the economy and economic growth?
Well, just to give you a sense of how horrific this number is, Sean, you know, when I'm a little older than you. When I arrived in Washington, it was 1984. And at that time, you guys aren't going to believe this. Do you know what the entire national debt was at that time? $1 trillion. $1 trillion. And by the way, we thought that was outrageously high. We couldn't believe that as Reaganites that we'd ever have $1 trillion debt. And now we're at $34 trillion. And look, under the Biden budget, over the next 10 years, you know where the debt goes? To over $50 trillion. I mean, this is insanity. This is craziness. And I can't just blame this on Biden. It's both parties. They are addicted to government spending. It's like, you know, Buzz Lightyear to infinity and beyond. This is craziness, and we've got to bring it to a stop. And by the way, the government revenues, the intake as a share of GDP is as high today as it's ever been. The problem is the spending is just going up and up like that.
Yep, that's why you had like $1/3 of $1 trillion deficit in just the first 2 months of the fiscal year. And it was because it wasn't just the revenue coming in, outlays rose by $155 billion. It's just insanity. Oh, and then the $1 trillion in interest payments we're going to make this year. Americans, speaking of spending, Americans aren't buying electric vehicles, but Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg says it's not because people don't want them, it's because they don't know enough about them.
We need to make sure that there's a level of education domestically about the charging capacity many people already have and don't know it. What I mean by that is a majority of Americans live in a single-family home where they might be surprised to realize that all you need technically for charging infrastructure is a plug in the wall.
Yeah, we're too stupid to know how charging things work. Meantime, it's just gotten harder for some buyers to get the federal tax break on new electric vehicles. New rules, which started this year, limit some EVs for the $7,500 credit from 43 to just 19 because of where the parts and such are sourced. But Steve, it's still a boondoggle and a handout, and you can get this credit on leases.
Yeah. Well, first of all, come on, Pete Buttigieg. I mean, how patronizing was that statement? Like patting people on the head saying, you just don't understand how great these cars are. You know, you really want them. You just don't. You're just not smart enough to know that you need them. Look, less than 10% of the sales of cars since 2023 were EVs. And, you know, we're paying people $7,500, at least if you can qualify for the rebate and the cash check to buy these cars. We're spending billions of dollars to build them as taxpayers, and every possible advantage we're giving to people to buy electric vehicles, and they're still not buying them. And, you know, the idea that we're going to go to 50 and then 70 and then 100% electric vehicles over the next 10 or 12 years is craziness. Americans keep saying they don't want them. Incidentally, I was just looking at a chart of where people are buying EVs. The only states where they're really very, prominent number of people are buying EVs are in California and New York. In red states, nobody buys EVs. And you know why? Because they think they're Biden cars, and conservatives don't want to buy the Biden car.
They're Biden cars, they're China cars, one or the other. They don't want them. I mean, you're right, Steve.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not going to work for America.
Hey, Sean, they're Biden cars made in China.
Steve Moore, always a pleasure. Good to see you. Happy New Year.